Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a discussion of two most disruptive things that we've seen in our world in the past few years, open access and AI. My name is Tom Chavarella. I'm head of public affairs and advocacy for Frontiers. This is my colleague, Frank Helvig. We are very happy to be speaking with you all today. Thank you for sharing your morning with us. Before we move forward, as with all things happening here, spacebar doesn't work? Yep. Down arrow. No. Nope. Mouse. Got it. Thank you. We are running all of the sessions by the Charleston Code of Conduct. If you need or want to read more about that, you can use the QR code here. Also, please help us make this as accessible as possible. This is being filmed, so people who aren't here can see it later on. If you ask a question, please identify yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? There are no microphones in this room, so I will try to enunciate. If you ask something, I will enunciate as well, so it gets picked up by the camera as well. Frank and I are going to go back and forth. I'm going to talk a little bit first about the status of AI in the United States. That is part of the field that I work in government affairs and advocacy. Frank's going to talk more about open access. I'm going to come back to talk about how AI is specifically used inside of Frontiers. So we're going to go very broad first. How is AI being handled inside of the United States and elsewhere? Then we're going to talk specifically about AI inside of Frontiers. And Frank's going to wrap up with talking about the work that he does on a daily basis, and we will certainly leave time for questions. So if you want to know more in detail about how Frontiers feels about AI and copyright, we were able to put forward our thoughts last year. The Copyright Office had asked people in a request for information to share thoughts. It was a large questionnaire, something like 58 questions about all aspects of AI and copyright. We answered the ones that met our needs best. You can read that in full there, but in brief, we want it clear that we support authors exercising their copyrights to the fullest extent. Everything we publish is the CC BY license. That is the only one of the CC licenses that we use. We don't take a position on that licenses opt-in or opt-out for AI. We don't make the license, but we use the license. And Creative Commons has been embarking on a listening tour in the past year. Some of you might have been involved in that, where they've been asking for input from the community about how the licenses might adapt over the next few years. So please keep an eye on that if you haven't seen that yet. As for AI in the United States, we are, of course, meeting in Charleston after a seismic week last week, but there's a lot of bipartisan work on AI that's still being done. There is no comprehensive federal legislation on AI right now. Some agencies have made their own rules, but there's no overarching rules. There are bipartisan concerns, though. China is coming up constantly. The global competition in generally of who's going to lead AI is coming up. Worldwide standards are coming up as well. Who's going to write those standards? Who's going to enforce them? And something that gets less attention but is exceedingly important, energy infrastructure. AI takes up an enormous amount of energy. You might have seen that 3 Mile Island is back online now, thanks to Microsoft and OpenAI. The needs of this, how we fund it, how we build it, how we safeguard it is going to become more of an issue over the next few years. While the federal government's been trying to figure all these things out, the states have been jumping in themselves and they're making a patchwork of things. So this will be fine. States' rights certainly does rule the day in some areas of the United States, but we're all waiting for the federal legislation as well. In the meantime, the White House has stepped in, the Biden administration, to do what it can through executive orders. It issued 2 executive orders on AI. Those will become null and void come to January. Executive orders from the last administration don't carry over into the new administration unless the new administration wants that. With this new administration, we can expect they're going to repeal most of them. Knowing that, a lot of the deadlines for AI have to be met by the end of this year anyway. So the repeal is kind of cosmetic. A lot of the things that the Biden administration wanted to do in terms of AI will go into effect by the end of this year. With that in mind, a couple of key dates, just so everyone's aware of what happens between the old Congress and the new Congress. Congress is in session right now. The lame duck Congress is meeting. They've got a lot on their plate, a lot of government funding. The defense bill, the farm bill is a year overdue. They should be doing something with that. AI could come up as well, but it's probably not the top thing on the list. It'll probably get addressed come January with the new 119th Congress. To step out of the US just for one moment, I wanted to mention that there was significant legislation, the EU AI Act, which gave a really great framework. It broke things down in a very understandable way. Here are the buckets of AI. What's allowed and not, and what are the rules around if it is allowed. This is a fantastic framework. Personally, I think the United States would do well to adopt something like this. The United States, for better or for worse, believes in its exceptionalism, and therefore it's probably not going to adopt these very straightforward standards wholly. They're going to do it in their own way. It's important to remember that the EU AI Act is not a copyright act. There's already plenty of copyright laws going on in the EU. This is going to help enforce that, but it doesn't create new laws. And I will put in a plug for the long arm of the law session happening this Friday. Happens every year at Charleston. It's great. If you really want to get into the specifics of AI and copyright in the US, all over the world, that is the session for you. So with that as an appetizer, I will hand it off to Frank now to talk a little bit more.
Thanks, Tom. So yeah, that's quite a variety of areas, industries, and so forth, where AI is relevant. It's omnipresent, so to say. But I'm going to focus really on a quite narrow area, which is indeed copyright related, and it is our scholarly publishing industry. Yeah, and it is about how, like, across different scholarly publishing business models, scholarly articles can be used by AI applications, and what then downstream the effects are. And I want to look into this across two different dimensions. So the one is about the speed of the global open access transition, and the second dimension is a bit nitty-gritty licensing. I have one slide on indeed some copyright aspects as well. But let's first look at the speed of transition on a global scale. For this, I'm showing here basically a journals market view, that's dimensions data. The first thing to point out is that the so-called closed share is going up actually for years, but in this projection here for 2024 quite substantially. That confirms that the first of three models I'm going to look into is really still the dominant model, which is like, yeah, we call it sometimes toll access or subscription based. So yeah, so this is really important to keep an eye on. The second most dominant model, and it is really the dominant open access transition strategy we see on a global scale, I would say, are these so-called transformative agreements. And somewhat good news is, if you look at the, I don't have the pointer here, but if you look at the hybrid and dual numbers combined, which is basically represents immediate access, that makes up now more than 50%. So that's great. But I say somewhat good news because the closed share going up, not just in absolute terms. I mean, you see that also the total numbers going up. It is really now, at least in this projection, going up in relative terms, which is, I think, quite concerning, because it means after 20 plus 30 years or whatever we are doing this now, we enter a reversal of the open access transition. Yeah, so in this sense, because the dominant open access transition strategy of transformative agreements is now in play for about 10 years, I think it's fair also to say that the effectiveness of this strategy is somewhat plateauing. Yeah, but don't take my word for it. There are reports out there. I'm sure you have heard about it here at the conference already. I just want to point out a few things about this particular report. This is from CHISC in the UK. It's a good report, but it's also important to pay attention because it comes from the country from where most articles covered by these transformative agreements are coming from. Yeah, so they really know what they are talking about. They analyze the UK specifically. There's a chart here, but also the global situation. And the second thing I want to emphasize is this quote here because it does mention the US, yeah. So it's already they kind of conclude it's even not working right now, but they even extrapolate into the future and say even if the US and China combined would join that strategy, it's not going to work. It's very unlikely to promise transition, as you can see here. And in summary of this first dimension, how different models affect AI use opportunities downstream, I would say, yeah, so the transformative agreements are not working. At the same time, I'm doing this now for 10 plus years. I have never heard a proper good reason why not to focus on another strategy, which is what I'm advocating here for, basically fully open access models. And we have always an alternative, yeah. So like there are always alternatives available, and there are always opportunity costs. And the thesis here basically is that, I mean, the toll access anyways, but even with the transformative agreements, we run a serious risk moving now towards 2030 to ultimately slow down that transition, you know, or maybe even reverse it. And by contrast, fully open access allows that faster open access transition, which then in terms of AI use for research, also for like downstream like applications for the public at large, it means simply more articles are open access, which undoubtedly would be good for AI. Which brings me to the second dimension. Yeah? So we have now looked at open access as a whole, how this is going to develop. And now I'm kind of drilling one level down to what types of open access. Yeah, Tom mentioned already CC BY. Yeah, so before I go into the details, I actually thought it helpful to just quickly remind what is actually the copyright situation. So I will be at the session Friday morning to double check. Yeah, but so basically, if there's no CC BY license in place, yeah, so intuitively we would think, well, it's happening anywhere, right? Everywhere, like ChatGPT, and everyone is scraping everything to get their hands on. But I've done like some research in the past on Google Books. I'm sure some of you know all these like legal cases and so forth. So it is actually, from a legal point of view, only possible to openly text mine or like use text and data mining or AI applications on copyright material if there is a copyright exception in place. In the US, it's called fair use. It's an open norm. These exceptions, however, are often limited, specifically with regard to the attribute commercial or not, but also with regard to purpose, specifically on our context research purposes. Important to mention, contracts can override it. Technical protection measures can override it. Circumventing the technical protection measures is like in most countries, actually almost all countries, not allowed. Japan stands out as the best copyright in terms of like research purpose, but even there it's like limited to research purpose, so one can argue how liberal it should be. But anyways, point being, CC BY is still super important for applying AI and deriving all these benefits from it on a broad scale and openly without having to ask for permission. And I will explain now also why this is really important, because if I go back to these three different like models, yeah, toll access, TAs or bundle deals, and fully OA. So the classical subscription-based toll access deal, there are no open licenses. Yeah? So this is done via separate agreements, or it's like baked into license agreements. But in any case, you need some sort of extra agreement. And that comes often also with the uncertainty whether or not you need an agreement and how the agreement is structured, and not the least also legal disputes are coming out of it and will in the future undoubtedly come out of it. And then you have also sometimes additional fees. So for content already paid for, which is free, you may have to pay. And the admin, yeah, this is like quite generic term, but it's actually like a huge aspect here, because we are talking about multiple, I mean, hundreds, thousands of rights holders across the globe. And we are talking about like thousands, millions, I mean, not millions, but maybe thousands of like individual research groups, startups, big companies, small companies wanting to do that AI. So you have many correlation. If you have to like clear all these rights for applying AI, this is like a massive amount of transaction coordination costs, which is all tied to this classical copyright framework based on which tool access is built. Yeah. Going to the second model, the transformative agreements, of course, you have a bundle. You have like, roughly speaking, the tool access bundle. This is the same what I just explained. The open access component, that's the interesting part, is really a mix of licenses, including more restrictive licenses than CC BY. As you see in this graph here, I looked at a few different sources. I thought this is most illustrative, but you can estimate it's about like 35% of all articles have a license which is more restrictive than CC BY. And this is like quite a lot, yeah. Compared, for example, to the fully open access publishers, at least the big ones, like it's nearly 100% CC BY license. Yeah, so I was wondering, so why this difference? Yeah, why do we have like 25, 20, or maybe even 35% difference? Yeah, in terms of like articles being published under more restrictive open licenses. And yeah, there are some discussions, like I worked in open access books, for example, there are discussions about like authors wanted and so forth. But does that really on a global scale, like we're talking about millions of articles, explain like a difference of 35% these more restrictive licenses? I believe this is not the case. I think for most part, the reason lies elsewhere. And that's like described here on this slide. So basically, legacy publishers like require, or at least via workflows, nudge authors to still, even for open access articles, to transfer copyrights to the publisher. Yeah? And that includes commercial use. And then the combination of owning the commercial rights and then publishing the open access article under a more restrictive license at scale really supports or is one of the pillars of a secondary revenue stream for open access articles. Yeah? This is not very obvious, but for AI it becomes pretty obvious. You can sell this to pharma and AI companies, and it's better possible if you have these rights and the articles are not CC BY available elsewhere. This has other implications, but to focus here on AI only, it is again that basically less articles are available to the public domain for like open, permissionless application of AI. And the fully aware publishers, they don't do any of that. Yeah, our like, I don't know, 500,000 or how many articles we have published by now, like they get scraped all the time, and that's how it's supposed to be. This is what open access is about. So overall conclusion across these two dimensions I was talking about, yeah, so we have basically the first dimension was the speed of transition, and to maybe put this in other words, think about 2030, yeah, we have now like 5 million or something articles, let's say it's 7 million then, and the difference between fully aware and the current transition strategy of transformative agreements could really mean we have maybe 5 million instead of 4 million open access articles. The second layer, or the second dimension here, so how many of these sets of articles are then CC BY licensed? Yeah, and I was just like totally making it up, yeah, but I want to discuss also, yeah, that in the scenario of the transformative agreements leading to 4 million open access articles, that if you stick to the 35% or let's say 25% more restrictive licenses, you end up with only 3 million CC BY licensed articles in 2030. By contrast, the fully open access, global open access transition strategy may lead to close to 100%, 5 million articles. So that's already a difference of 2 million CC BY licensed articles. Yeah? And I think this is really worth pointing out that this is a huge opportunity or a potentially huge loss, yeah, for all of us. So yeah, just to summarize that, basically with the fully aware version, what we are also representing as a company, we will have the most benefits coming out of AI for research, for the public at large, like translating to industry applications, education, innovation and so forth. And that's from me, I think. Yep.
Frank, thanks very much. Thank you for describing how we get to where we do in terms of wanting to do things as openly as possible, why we feel it's the right way to do it, but how does that actually get out in the world? We have been using AI, as all publishers have. We've been using AI in different ways for a lot of years, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. But more so than that, I want to talk about how the industry at large has been addressing it in the past year and how Frontiers is helping with that. So some of these slides that you're going to see here come from a colleague of mine. Her name is on screen. Marie is with Frontiers. She's also on the Council of Code. So I just want to make it abundantly clear that Frontiers is not just following these guidelines, we're also helping to shape these guidelines as well. There are plenty of valid reasons to use AI. If you're a researcher, if you're an author, if you're a writer, up on screen are just a couple of examples of legitimate ways people are using AI now. And Frontiers does not stand in the way of any of these things, and nor do any of the agencies that have been thinking about this over the past few years. In fact, just this year, these three agencies, these are mostly the largest umbrella agencies in our world, have been taking this on, have been thinking about what do they need to tell their membership, individual researchers, libraries, funders, others, what do we need to communicate about our expectations around AI and how it's being used. So as I mentioned, we have a colleague at Frontiers, Marie Solier, who is a part of COPE and has helped to draft these guidelines. You can go online and read the published guidelines that COPE has made. You can also go onto STM's website and see what they have told authors about the uses of AI. The overall thing that you're going to see from STM, from COPE, and also from WAMI is that it is disclosure. It is okay to do these things. You have to tell us. And the publishers, as I've given an example here on the website, publishers are updating their terms and conditions, their instructions for authors, for reviewers to talk about, we expect AI is going to be used. We do need to have it disclose them. This will help us understand how the articles are being written and what other things we might have to watch for. So that is happening on the researcher side. The researcher is going to start with it, using AI in some way to help to shape their article. That article is then going to come into Frontiers or somebody else. And then what are we going to use AI for? What are the publishers going to use AI for? On screen are 5 buckets of where AI is being used most right now. Some of these are on the front end. Some of these are on the back end. So for instance, front end would be before the article was published. Back end would be something like the recommender system. You know, you see this on websites all the time. You read an article, you go to the CNN website, you read something and it says, if you read this, you might want to read that. That's a recommender system. Those are not new. They've been around a long time, but AI is making them much better. Same thing is happening inside of the publisher websites. If you read an article on quantum mechanics, at the end of that article, you're going to start to see other articles that publisher has that we think you might be interested in based upon who you are and what you've read in the past. So that's how AI is being used by publishers on the front end and on the back end, pre-publication and post. But we get the most questions about pre-publication use. How is Frontiers using the AI when an article comes in? For that, we have developed a system that we call IRA. IRA is our AI research assistant. IRA goes through 13 AI quality checks. Every paper that comes into Frontiers starts in IRA, but papers do not end in IRA. It is a tool for the humans. It is not a tool to replace the humans. It is not a tool in lieu of humans. So yes, everything will start inside of IRA, and it will give our editors an understanding of what kind of article has just come in. At all publishing companies, regardless of business model, the holy grail of keeping yourself in business is to make as much money or to spend only as much time as you have to on all of the papers you have to touch. Thousands upon thousands of papers come into Frontiers and other publishers that need to go through a quality check. We don't publish everything. No publisher publishes everything. But if you can cut down the amount of time it takes to decide what you want to publish, you will do it. That makes you incredibly more cost effective. And Ira has helped us, and other AI systems that other publishers have built have helped them do that as well. Lastly, I'll leave it with this slide, which is just to talk about how, while Frontiers is happy to be taking the lead on a lot of these things, we cannot do it on our own. We have to work with the authors, we have to work with the institutions, with the libraries and the librarians, with the funders, to understand why these standards are needed, to understand why we're supporting the standards in the way that we are, and then to get feedback from them as well. Because while we do think we have a good head start, as I said, Frontiers has been using AI for a long time, not by far do we think we have all of the answers. So if there's a question about how the AI is being used, or you have an idea about how the AI can be used better, we are very much into hearing about that. With that, Frank, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah. So basically, so I was talking about like open access and fully open access, how this enables AI benefits downstream better, and now Tom showed some amazing stuff how AI is used within Frontiers, and this is well, it's a segue for me to say all of that you would get, or institutions get when they partner with Frontiers. This is our business model. This is our institutional business model. We call it Institutional Partnerships Program, and it's all about like making it easier for authors to publish open access. And excuse me, and it is about supporting librarians and other representatives of research performing organizations, funders, and consortia to help their affiliated and branded authors. We do have like consortium agreements, as you see here, about 10, including with the University of California. We have like altogether about 600 institutions partnering with us in different models, which are summarized here, and we of course like keep an ear on the pulse what institutions need, and have therefore a variety of models on offer. And so on top of the benefits of Frontiers as a whole and institutional partnerships generally, there is, just as an example here, listed some benefits we have heard about and then like implemented it in our newly launched, or last year launched it, our flat fee model. And here's just an overview of the first partners and institutions, including 2 national consortia in Germany and Sweden, which have opted for that model, and we are almost like a full year in now, and looking forward to onboard more partners, and also will probably have some sort of like evaluation after the first year. And I want to close with another type of innovation which concerns specifically the Institutional Partnerships Program. It's not a model, it's not a business model innovation, it is a platform innovation. So we already have a very useful dashboard for existing partners, where basically all the like financial data can be downloaded, and verifications and reports and so forth. But we are enhancing that, or actually it will be joined by, we call it currently an insights platform, where we really want to increase the transparency, so that like anyone who is interested, so also non-partners, anyone could like have a look there, see exactly what is basically their authors or their researchers, what are they doing with Frontiers already, like what is the spending, and what theoretically could be the what could be an agreement, how could it look like going forward. So this is like potentially also including competitive intelligence. So this is in the works, and with this we want to leave hopefully some time for some questions. We have 10 minutes left. Pretty good. Very good. Any questions?